Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back. Hey, everybody, we're back with more live from the Heartland. I'm still Michael James here in the 49th Ward, a very blue section of a very blue Chicago. And we are glad to be here. And, in riding around the neighborhood here in the 49th Ward, Rogers Park, I came across a place. It was kind of a funky looking storefront. It's right next to the wonderful Archie's Cafe. And it had a name on it, the Roman Susan Gallery. And I tried to find out a little bit about it, weasel my way in, maybe with a show a few years ago. It took a while, but I eventually met this next fellow, Nathan Smith, who's going to tell us all about the Roman Susan Gallery and some of the events that they're putting on, which I have some ties to, as well as some challenges to their ongoing existence. So with not any, what they used to call further ado, I'm just going to say, how are you, Nathan?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on, Michael.
It's good to have you on. So
yeah.
How about a little history of this Roman Susan Gallery?
Yeah, so Roman Susan is in a small storefront that's actually on Loyola Avenue. It's like just west of the Loyola train station. And it is named after my partner, my wife's grandparents, Roman and Susan. Kristen Abhalter, she is a artist who has a background in theater design and sculpture and painting. And she had a studio at the end of the block, basically, of Loyola Avenue. And she just kept walking by, as you said, this funky little storefront, and it was for rent. And she had some experience running storefront art spaces in Minneapolis. And she was just sort of like, we're going all over the city all the time to see different kinds of cultural things happening. Maybe there could be a little more right where we live, because we live like a 5-minute walk away. And she called up the place and the rent was cheap. And she was like, I'm going to think about it for a week. And she thought about it for a week and she decided, like, no, that's too much. I can't do that on my own. And then she was incredibly displeased with herself for a week. And that at the end of that second week, she was like, I've got to do this thing. Like, I need to open this space up and see what the neighborhood wants it to be. So she did that in November 2012. So we just sort of looped around and ended our 11th year at this space. And the entire time we've been here, it's been interesting because it is in a strange space. Like you said, it's where the train sort of is going on a diagonal northwest.
Yeah, if people are going down Sheridan Road, there's a train, if they're going south on Sheridan Road above Devon there, it's you go under the L track, and on the other side of the tracks, around the corner, is on Loyola Avenue, is a little funky strip of the coolest stuff in the neighborhood these days, with both Archie's and the Roman Susan Gallery.
Yeah, and it's, the train disrupts the street grid, and it also like defines the shape of the building. So it's this flat iron that's built, on the total footprint of the lot, and we're in the very nose of the flat iron. So our space is sort of like a pie shape, and it's very small, which is why it works as an experimental space for art, because it's so small that we can afford to do it and not have to decide that it needs to make money selling art, which I think is one of the defining things of what's happened here so far in the last 11 years. Like roughly 150 artist-led projects have happened in this space. And after the first couple of years, we really figured out what we were doing. And we're like, we're not really a gallery. We're not going to sell art. We're not going to go to art fairs or store things. But we want to hold space and be a platform for artists to explore their ideas that couldn't work somewhere where you would have to sell something. So like this Friday, we have an opening with an artist who's primarily a dancer and a choreographer. the artist's name is Courtney McIndans, and they have sculpture in this space that is made out of different materials that are meant to be interacted with, and it's partially made out of ice. If we were trying to sell art, we could not have ice sculptures by someone who's never had an exhibit as something we decide to do for 2 months, you know?
Unfortunately, that'll be the night before this gets aired. Although
Yeah.
the people who go to YouTube early enough will find out about it.
The opening's on Friday, but it'll be here for a month. So
Okay.
if you want to come visit, you won't miss it if you aren't here Friday.
Let me ask you, Nathan, what are some of the highlights of the exhibits you've had in there over the last 11 years?
I think people responding to the space in the neighborhood as they are is a really big part of it, not sort of treating it like a blank canvas that can just hold whatever idea they had before they got here. So I think it works really well for site responsive things and things that are interactive. And one example of that is an artist named Jay Kent. We just had an exhibition with them, but 10 years ago, we had an exhibition with them that was called On the Impossibility of a Singular Hand. And what they had a very involved visual exhibition, but they had a performance where they sprouted seeds in the palm of their hand over the course of a week, and it was always in someone's hand. It was in their hand 99% of the time, but the space was open 24 hours a day for a week. They slept on the floor. They like lashed this seed pod in their hand, and people could just interact with them in any way they wanted. They didn't provide for their own needs. Like people brought them food. They didn't have any food unless someone brought it. So that sort of like extravagant, trusting, and interactive gesture. That's one of the bigger ones that someone has made here. Very trusting, but I think when people channel that kind of spirit and really interact with the people around them, that's when it gets exciting.
Nathan, let me ask you, what has been the impact of having Archie's, which started later than you did? It's been
Yeah.
a few years, and I refer to Archie's kind of as it's a woman named Roberta runs it, and they have
Mm-hmm.
a liquor license, and they have some art, and it's a neat little spot. In a lot of ways, it's the closest thing to the Heartland Cafe, long gone.
Yeah.
What's been your relationship with Roberta, with Archie's, and has that uh, impacted your gallery at all?
So Roberta has been in these storefronts as long as we have. They did sort of different iterations and ideas. And another neighbor of ours, Maggie Roche, has also been here the whole time we have. So we've all been here for 11 plus years. And Roberta initially did a couple different things that were very like art studio like. And so we would collaborate on dates and times. I think that Archie's really changes the dynamic of the street in that it has a much more uh, consistent presence, right? Like they're a restaurant, they have regular hours, they're open. Whereas we are, we occasionally will be like, we're going to be closed for 3 weeks because someone's building an ice sculpture, and then we'll be open again for a while. Like it changes the dynamic a lot to have people knowing they can come there all the time and there is presence and there are people there. We try to stay visible and interesting from the street while we're not here, but their presence really changes the foot traffic and the like incorporation of music and performance like is enormous. They're having music 4 or 5 times a week, which is a total sea change. The street used to be very deserted. At different points, you'd just be sitting on the sidewalk by yourself forever. And that was fun, but it definitely is interesting that there are more people and it engages college students way more than our mildly esoteric art possibly does. So,
Well, you've
yeah.
got I understand from talking with you, you have a challenge coming up to your future. Why don't you tell us how you're structured? Because
Yep.
I think you're probably a not-for-profit, and tell us about your rental situation.
Yeah, so we are a non-for-profit and we After we were here for 3 years, we decided to go that route. And when we did, we decided that the only people we wanted on our board were artists who had done things here before. So they are very sympathetic to our aims. For the first 9 years we were here, we had a lease that had a 30-day opt out for the landlord. And the year we moved in, there used to be no train entrance on our side of the train. They put one in that year, and Loyola invested a lot of money in the train station, and they own all of the real estate surrounding our building. So almost from the start, we were just like, any day now, like the other shoe is going to fall 30 days from now. That could be the end of us here. So we had a lot of time to like mentally prepare for that. And we took a lot of like programming actions to make sure that if we didn't have a storefront, we could still meaningfully engage and exist in the neighborhood where we live. And so we now have 5 programs, and our storefront is one of them. But currently, the building is for sale, actively for sale, which it had not been in the past. We happen to have a lease that is a couple years in the future now, so that's a little bit more security for us. But it definitely seems like our presence in the storefront has a shelf life of 1 or 2 more years. So we're going to make the best of the time that we have and really try to invest our attention and excitement in some of the other programming we're doing. One part of that is for the last 18 months, 2 years, something like that, we've been holding events at Burger Park, which is part of a series called Movement Studies. And that is a bit of the tie-in between you and I right now.
Well, tell everybody about it.
Yeah. So Movement Studies attempts to be a responsive series of events at Burger Park that are related to social or environmental transitions. And they're all led by artists. So in the past year, we've had a variety of things. Like we had a quilting, mending workshop. We had a footwork dance competition. And we're currently hosting a series of events with Frutas, which is a trans-led organization that is holding Spanish language literary events. So they're collaborating with trans writers in Mexico City to present their work. On November 20th, we are fortunate enough to host a book launch for yourself about rising up angry. So maybe you care if I flip it for a second and ask you what your experience is with the book so far, and just yeah.
I was motivated to get this book out. I've always thought about it, and I kind of just envisioned. I put out a series of books called Pictures from the Long Haul, which are my photos, and I've done 3 of those in the last few years. And I was planning to do one on rising up angry because we were having a gathering. A lot of us in our 80s now. We're getting kind of old. And we pulled people together. I mean, there were some younger people, and of course, the kids and grandkids of the Rising Up Angry people. But I decided to get a book done for that event, which was on the 14th of what is the month? October. And my son, David Libman, who lives down in Athens, Georgia, and does a lot of the layout. He used to do stuff for the old Heartland Journal, et cetera. He's been around a long time, knows a lot of stuff. He really expanded the book to include, memories from a lot of the early members. And it wasn't, so it's not just a picture book. There's a bunch of text. And we've almost sold enough of them. And this is without having a distributor or being in many bookstores. Probably sold almost enough to break even. And that's a chunk. And I know that the first 30 people that are coming to the event over at Burger Park on the Monday the 20th at 7 p.m., they all get a free copy signed with a Red Star stamp and maybe a little note if we have time and figure it out. But I've had a good response to the book, both on Facebook, on Instagram, in person. If anyone ever wants to get one and they don't know how, just get a hold of me at fatback@aol.com and we'll help you out. but I would recommend that you all get ready to go over to Burger Park. Beautiful place. I think it's at
Granville and Sheridan.
and
Well, hold on. Can I pause for 1 second? There's a fire inspector at our door at Roman Susan. I think I have to stop.
We're back with live from the Heartland. We're talking with Nathan Smith of the Roman Susan Gallery, and he just had a fire inspector coming to the door. And I'm wondering if that's in any way connected to what is perceived to be a possible takeover or purchase of the building by Loyola. And I think you once used the term glacier or glacial institutions.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone running maybe a street level art space has a lot of thoughts about what effect it has on the things around it. And I think that, gentrification is obviously a large, outstanding thing that has been historically related to art in various ways. Where we are situated, completely surrounded by what is owned by an institution that's been here for 100 years, and presumably they want to continue being here for 100 years.
They will.
It feels a little different to me than other sort of like, when I hear gentrification, I often think of like making an area cool. I don't think that's really what we can possibly do here, because we're surrounded by like huge corporate things. There's no middle wave. It's all this large institutional thing that will keep moving out into the surrounding area. And it's all sort of, inevitable and carving the landscape, maybe a little like a glacier.
Well, I don't know what will happen over there. There's some empty space. Yeah. Some buildings have already been torn down, but people should make sure they check out the Roman Susan Gallery and Archie's Cafe, because the future, I mean, it's a hip little section of the neighborhood, and we'll see how long it lasts. We're going to run out of time, so let me ask you one more question, Nathan. Sure. What is wage? It's something that you shared with me, and I like the notion of paying artists.
Yeah. So as we matured as an artist-run organization, one of our long-term goals was to, pay for the real cost of things, pay people to do the work they're doing, which is art. And oftentimes people get caught in a situation where they're doing lots of free work for exposure or the potential to sell something in the future. WAGE is an organization, the acronym is Working Artists in the Greater Economy, and they're based in New York. And essentially they're taking models sort of like from, one of the models is the Canadian model for institutes of contemporary art, where there's standardized artist fees across nonprofits. Like, you are a nonprofit, you are not really in the space of selling art. So if people are doing the work to share their work through your organization, you are obligated to pay them. And so I think we started paying people at a low wage, at a low rate, sort of in 2018, a couple of years after we became a nonprofit. And last year, we finally met wage rates, which are sort of like a minimum that they set for any organization with income under $500,000. Our budget is under $100,000. So making that amount available to artists is like a real desired commitment for us, that we do our best to do that, because otherwise there's sort of only people who can afford to work for free can exist in that space, right? And that excludes tons of people and tons of artists. And an important part of our program at our storefront is that we accept proposals from artists and we facilitate as many as we can. But if you're proposing something to a space where there's no financial support, only certain people can do that, right? And we found ourselves culpable in this situation of just perpetuating impoverished artists or only artists who have other kinds of wealth to be able to do it. So we're trying to change that, and we prioritize paying people. And
that's great. And I really like that you, in working with me, we worked it out so that the first 30 people who come on Monday the 20th over to Burger Park will get a free copy of my book, Rising Up Angry.
Yeah.
Will you give us a website where people can, and your address one more time before we break up?
Our website is romansusan.org. So it's ROMANSUSAN.org. And our storefront location is at 1224 West Loyola Avenue. The event we will be doing on November 20th is at Burger Park Cultural Center, and that's at 6205 North Sheridan. It's a park that's right on the lake. It's hard to park around there. If you can take public transit, please do, because there's not a lot of parking spots, but the bus and train run right by it. So, yeah.
I want to thank you very much, and I'll be talking to you in the next week or so. And I'll probably stop in over by the gallery even before then.
Cool.
So thank you so much there, young fella. And